Yi Futian was surprised. He didn't want to join the fight at all. By watching the face-off between the proud son of darkness and Princess Donghuang, he was hoping to gauge the real capabilities of the top cultivators from the Dark Court and the only child of Donghuang the Great Emperor. It seemed that Jian Qingzhu didn't push Qi hard enough to force him to exert his full strength during the previous encounter. Yi Futian was surprised. He didn't want to join the fight at all. By watching the face-off between the proud son of darkness and Princess Donghuang, he was hoping to gauge the real capabilities of the top cultivators from the Dark Court and the only child of Donghuang the Great Emperor. It seemed that Jian Qingzhu didn't push Qi hard enough to force him to exert his full strength during the previous encounter. However, Yi Futian didn't expect that the cold and haughty Princess Donghuang would call him out in front of everyone. Yi Futian was curious to see how powerful Princess Donghuang was. Besides, he didn't want to show off his ability in front of these people from the Donghuang Imperial Palace, as he was worried that they could figure him out quickly. Princess Donghuang knew too much about him already. Qi Yi defeated Jian Qingzhu with ease, as formidable as Jian Qingzhu was. Yi Futian would face a strenuous fight if he sparred with Qi Yi. It would be impossible for him to hold back and conceal his strength, which wasn't what he wanted at all. But Princess Donghuang asked him herself. It would be rude and impudent if he declined her request. Yi Futian was caught between a rock and a hard place. Princess Donghuang's eyes fixed on Yi Futian. It was hard to speculate her thoughts based on her standoffish manner. She seemed to be waiting for his answer. Yes, Princess, Yi Futian nodded and replied. He would appear insensible and ignorant if he didn't follow her order. Yi Futian stepped up and emitted brilliant golden light from his body. Tremendous sword will was condensed and released as the trumpets of the divine elephant reverberated in the void. Millions of strings of the sword came into sight in the sky and made a terrifying screeching sound. Hundreds of thousands of swords uttered harsh and ear-piercing shrieks together. Yi Futian hovered in midair. Numerous divine elephants stampeded toward his opponent. Qi Yi shot a glance at Yi Futian. Although this was the first time he met Yi Futian, he had heard about him back in the Hidden Land realm. Rumor had it that Yi Futian was the most talented cultivator in the original realm and was known as the pride of the original realm. On top of that, he obtained God's inheritance in the God's relic. Qi Ye's eyes aimed beams of light of destruction at Yi Futian as soon as Yi Futian made a move. The sky was pitch black as a scary, swirling black hole emerged from the darkness. The black hole shot out spears of the underworld, each of which contained incredible destructive power. Qi Yi moved his hand downward. The swirling storm in the dark void instantly spewed out spears of the underworld toward Yi Futian's body. Yi Futian used the divine elephants as his shield. He strode across the void with great force. Then he applied the pinching sword techniques with his fingers. Suddenly, the brilliant blades of light shone through space as the strings of swords produced a deep, full sound. The immense sword will tore up the void and dashed against the spears of the underworld. A dazzling divine sword became visible in front of Yi Futian. He pushed his hand forward and transformed into a flash of lightning. The divine sword slashed through the sky and made an onslaught on Qi Yi. Qi Yi looked directly at Yi Futian. His eyes were like two fathomless abysses that could bring people into the endless darkness. Yi Futian's dazzling divine sword thrust forward and shattered everything around it. However, a terrifying black hole appeared in front of Qi Ye's body. The black hole devoured the sword of the great path of destruction and even attempted to wolf down Yi Futian along with the sword. Yi Futian stepped back. A dark and strong air current was roaring and surging around him. He charged forward while being covered by the golden divine elephants. With booming noise, the invisible spears of the underworld rained on the divine elephants. Yi Futian was pushed back by the unstoppable force. Under ceaseless bombardment, the golden divine elephant that was shielding Yi Futian started to crack. Yi Futian jostled forward and smashed everything to smithereens with the sword will and his fists. In the meantime, however, a ray of light of the underworld shone directly on Yi Futian from above and covered his body completely. As Qi Yi moved his hand downward in the next moment, a dark bolt of lightning from hell struck down and destroyed everything it touched. The area Yi Futian was standing in was buried in darkness and was about to blow out. The golden divine elephant covering Yi Futian's body kept cracking and disintegrating. With a deafening sound, Yi Futian fell to the ground. As he was groaning, the divine light of the great path of destruction blasted on him again. Bang! The divine elephant exploded. The terrifying divine light faded, but the light of the underworld was still cast upon Yi Futian's body as if it would strike him again at any time. Nothing special, Qi glanced at Yi Futian and said. Then he raised his head to look at Princess Donghuang and asked, "May I ask your highness to try it out with me?" Princess Donghuang darted a meaningful look at Yi Futian. Then she turned her beautiful eyes to Qi Yi standing in front of her. Yi Futian felt a little uneasy. Nevertheless, Yi Futian remained composed. Judging from the way Princess Donghuang looked at him, she might have figured something out. But it was not a big deal even if she saw through his trick. After all, Yi Futian fought with Qi Yi just as she requested. She couldn't demand him to win. Qi Yi was the proud son of the underworld, one of the most powerful cultivators of the next generation of the Dark Court. Yi Futian had to spare no effort and put most of his skills and techniques on display if he wanted to defeat Qi Yi. Needless to say, he preferred to prevent that from happening. He didn't really care much about the result of the contest. At this moment, beams of extremely brilliant divine light shone from the sky and penetrated the darkness. The crowd immediately looked at Princess Donghuang and couldn't help but exclaim to themselves about how ravishing she looked. Yi Futian also shifted his eyes to that direction. Princess Donghuang was wearing a pair of divine wings of the phoenix, splendid and large enough to blot out the sun. Every feather on the divine wings seemed to be burning with a dazzling golden light, as though it could incinerate any person it touched. The wings cut through the light of the underworld as she spread them open. A giant shadow of the divine phoenix emerged in the sky and covered the entire area. The shadow of the divine phoenix even appeared in her eyes. Qi Yi felt excruciating pain as if his body was set on fire when she looked at him. "You're not a match for me. How are you supposed to teach me a thing or two?" Princess Donghuang's voice was cold and unfriendly. She already reached the peak of the lower Renhuang plain, higher than Qi Yi. A shrill caw of the phoenix pierced through the sky and reverberated in the space. Qi Yi was dismayed by the sound. He felt dizzy and wobbly, as though he was about to sink into Princess Donghuang's eyes. The dark and destructive energy surged frantically around his body, trying to summon the darkness again. Princess Donghuang took a step forward. Glorious and breathtaking, she seemed like the only person worth attention in the entire world. All the people fighting around them stopped and cast their eyes on Princess Donghuang. The divine wings on her back flapped and shot out scintillating divine light. The dark energy swirling around Qi Yi's body was subdued and eventually dispersed. In the sky, the enormous divine phoenix uttered a caw at Qi Yi as the divine fire engulfed the space. The shadow of the underworld behind Qi Yi wanted to resist, yet the flames slowly consumed it. Facing the raging inferno, Qi Yi transformed into a black shadow and beat a hasty retreat back to the camp of the Dark Court. He looked quite embarrassed. Although Princess Donghuang was at a higher plane, as the proud son of the underworld, he shouldn't sustain a crushing defeat like this. He was puny and fragile when facing Princess Donghuang's attack. While he didn't exert all his strength, he also understood that Princess Donghuang didn't either. It was a casual sparring session for both of them. Yet he was overwhelmed by her and couldn't withstand a single blow. Princess Donghuang stepped back as if nothing happened. She quietly returned to her seat as the divine light around her body faded. She cast a disdainful look at Qi Yi and said, "Does the Dark Court plan to start the war right here?" Lord of the Underworld heard her and cracked a smile. "Well played. Princess Donghuang is magnificent, indeed. You are a true heir to Donghuang the Great Emperor. Qi Yi is not a match for you. We will learn from your highness again if the chance arises in the future. Take care." Cultivators from the Dark Court all moved back into the dark space where the dark energy was churning and swirling. Their bodies disappeared into the darkness in no time. People from the Divine Prefecture were not too excited. It was matter of course for them to win this battle. In fact, they were quite embarrassed since no one could beat the proud son of the underworld and Princess Donghuang had to join the fight herself. Nevertheless, it might be a good thing to show the enemy how powerful the princess was. Princess Donghuang was expected to reign over the world someday. She couldn't conceal her strength all the time. "We're incompetent and couldn't relieve your highness of your worries," said the college chief of the Tianshan Academy. Princess Donghuang shook her head. Even with Jian Qingzhu's extraordinary talent, it was only normal for him to lose to the proud son of the underworld, one of the 7 proud sons of the Dark Court. On the other hand, Yi Futian. Princess Donghuang darted another look at the silver-haired man standing below and saw that he was staring at her with his clear and seemingly innocent eyes as well. She couldn't tell if he lost to Qi Yi on purpose. Even so, it was highly suspicious for someone who had slaughtered high-level Renouangs to be trounced by Qi Yi. Many top cultivators could tell that Yi Futian didn't put forth his best efforts during the fight before. Why didn't Yi Futian want to show off in front of Princess Donghuang? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Cultivators from the Golden Divine Nation and the Shun clan were also confused. Yi Futian could have stepped up and risen to eminence if he seized the opportunity earlier, just like how the college chief of the Tianshan Academy hoped Jian Qingzhu could impress Princess Donghuang and follow her to cultivate in the Divine Prefecture. Cultivators from the Golden Divine Nation and the Shun clan were also confused. Yi Futian could have stepped up and risen to eminence if he seized the opportunity earlier, just like how the college chief of the Tianshan Academy hoped Jian Qingzhu could impress Princess Donghuang and follow her to cultivate in the Divine Prefecture. As long as Yi Futian displayed his ability, he could make Princess Donghuang think highly of him even if he didn't defeat the proud son of the underworld. But he didn't do that. On the contrary, he deliberately held back and lost the fight. Wouldn't it seem impudent and perfunctory in Princess Donghuang's eyes? Gai Qiong narrowed his eyes and stared at Yi Futian. Did Yi Futian not understand who Princess Donghuang was? Yi Futian would never rise to the high society in the Divine Prefecture if the great emperor learned about how he gave Princess Donghuang the runaround. How rude and disrespectful. Gai Qiong said, "Yi Futian, you obtained God's inheritance and used to show off your impressive divine wheels in the past. Why did you lose this fight?" Instead of bluntly accusing Yi Futian of not making an effort, Gai Qiong only insinuated that Yi Futian didn't do his best. But other people certainly understood that Gai Qiong was trying to ruin Yi Futian's future by pointing it out. Princess Donghuang was generous enough not to make a big thing out of Yi Futian's connection with the devil world. Yet he was still behaving in such a brazen and irreverent manner. Gai Qiong couldn't figure out what Yi Futian was thinking. Princess Donghuang obviously heard Gai Qiong's question as well, but she didn't pay him any attention. Standing on top of the stairs, she kept gazing at Yi Futian with her calm and captivating eyes. "Your Highness, Qi Yi is a very powerful cultivator. He subdued me after a moment of carelessness. Although I was still capable of fighting back, I saw that your Highness spread the amazing divine wings. I didn't dare to make a fumbling attempt in front of your magnificent presence. Please forgive me," Yi Futian admitted with ease. He couldn't deny what everyone witnessed with their own eyes. The battle was over now. Princess Donghuang couldn't ask him to perform in front of the crowd again. Princess Donghuang still stared at him distantly. She said, "You follow me." Then she turned around and walked toward the palace. "The rest of you, please do as you wish." The divine general next to Princess Donghuang took a good look at Yi Futian, then spoke to the others. A strange look flashed across Gai Qiong's face. Princess Donghuang asked Yi Futian to follow her? What did she mean? Princess Donghuang summoned Yi Futian alone. Was she displeased with what happened just now, or was she impressed by Yi Futian for real? With a puzzled look, Yi Futian didn't understand Princess Donghuang's intention either. Her eyes were too inscrutable to reveal her emotions. If only Yi Futian brought Fei Xue with him, then she might be able to tell him if Princess Donghuang's intention was good or bad. "I will be right back," Yi Futian said to Hua Jiyu. Hua Jiyu nodded slightly. Following a guide, Yi Futian climbed the stairs under everyone's watch. The crowd made a racket after Princess Donghuang and Yi Futian left. Cultivators from different forces couldn't stop talking and speculating. People from the Heavenly Mandate Academy were a little worried. No one could put their finger on Princess Donghuang's personality. They didn't know if she would be offended by what Yi Futian did before. The college chief of the Tiantian Academy stood in place and stared at Princess Donghuang's receding figure. He sighed to himself. Princess Donghuang didn't mention his request, which meant that she didn't grant it either. Don't be downhearted. Jian Qingzhu is an excellent cultivator and only lost the fight by accident. As the proud son of the underworld, Qi Yi is a formidable opponent. Jian Qingzhu already proved himself to be one of the best. He will certainly assume your mantle and make a name for himself in the divine prefecture in the future no matter where he cultivates, Shen Gao of the Shen clan said to the college chief of the Tiantian Academy. I hope so. The college chief of the Tiantian Academy nodded and said, Jian Qingzhu does have great talents. But he still needs to work harder. He can only be in awe at Princess Donghuang's unparalleled ability. Shen Gao almost rolled his eyes at the college chief of the Tiantian Academy. This old man laid his reputation on the line to beg for a brighter future for Jian Qingzhu, and he was still praising Princess Donghuang after she was gone. Besides, Princess Donghuang summoned Yi Futian rather than Jian Qingzhu. Did the college chief really have no resentment? Princess Donghuang is going to take over from the great emperor. Of course, she is incomparable, Shen Gao echoed. Cultivators chatted with each other casually. Some left, but the majority of the crowd stayed to see what would happen to Yi Futian. They wanted to know if Princess Donghuang had a positive or negative impression of him. Her attitude was crucial to many forces. At this point, Yi Futian followed Princess Donghuang into the great hall of the empty imperial palace. Princess Donghuang looked at Yi Futian and waved her hands to order the servants to clear out. Some guards stood outside of the hall. Only one attendant remained by the side of Princess Donghuang. Yi Futian stood quietly in the great hall. He was still perplexed when he saw that Princess Donghuang turned around and stared at him. However, Yi Futian maintained an upright posture in front of her elegant figure as if he didn't want to bend his head to her. Can I help your highness? Yi Futian asked. His voice was calm, neither supercilious nor obsequious. Are you upset at me? Princess Donghuang looked at him and asked. Her haughty bearing and her blunt question annoyed Yi Futian, yet he still kept a tight rein on his feelings and replied in a low voice, Your Highness must be joking. I'm only a cultivator from the Heavenly Mandate Academy in the Divine Prefecture. How can I be upset at Your Highness? Because of your master, Princess Donghuang continued. Yi Futian was surprised. He raised his head and studied her face. So Princess Donghuang knew that Yi Futian was among the disciples of the cottage in the Eastern Barren Territory. Yi Futian didn't expect her to remember that incident. He didn't know if she had any recollection of their first meeting. They were much younger back then. He was only 16 years old. Princess Donghuang was around the same age, judging by her appearance. I didn't realize you remembered, Yi Futian admitted after a short moment of silence. There was no point for him to hide or deny since she already recognized him. He said, How is my master doing? Not well, of course, Princess Donghuang replied coldly. Yi Futian glared at her. His face stiffened. May I ask your highness what crimes my master committed? Yi Futian asked. He was still unaware of the identity of his master in the cottage, nor did he know why Donghuang the great emperor sent people to capture him. Of course, he committed crimes. You don't need to know the details, Princess Donghuang said. So, your highness summoned me here only to tell me that you recognized me? Yi Futian asked her. Princess Donghuang still stared at him steadily. Their eyes met after minutes of silence. She still looked composed and arrogant. Unlike Yi Futian, Princess Donghuang was born with blue blood. Yi Futian worked his way up from the bottom even though his godfather said he was destined to be an emperor. Princess Donghuang, on the other hand, was high above others from the beginning. You don't need to be so suspicious. He was my father's study attendant, said Princess Donghuang. Yi Futian's eyes narrowed. Mr. Du from the cottage used to follow Donghuang the great emperor. On top of that, he probably served the twin great emperors at that time. Besides, he was the great emperor's study attendant. It seemed like he was familiar with the twin great emperors and had a close relationship with the great emperor. If that was true, he must have first-hand knowledge of the situation on Sky Mountain back in the days. Why did he stay in the Eastern Barren Territory and never display his ability? He probably made some mistakes as the great emperor's study attendant, since Princess Donghuang said he was guilty of crimes. I'm meeting you because your master pleaded with my father and wanted to know how you are doing. I got my answer now. You'd better reach Gai Qiong's level first if you want to see your master again. You're not in a position to hold a bias against me yet. Princess Donghuang looked at Yi Futian and said disdainfully. Yi Futian looked back at her and smiled in silence. He was not good enough indeed. She was the daughter of the sovereign of the Divine Prefecture. Who dared to hold a bias against her? Even the college chief of the Tianshan Academy begged her to let Jian Qingzhu follow her and cultivate in the Divine Prefecture. Yi Futian didn't expect that Mr. Du still kept his disciples in mind after being captured. It sounded like that his master was probably imprisoned by Donghuang the Great Emperor and still alive. You can go back now. I hope you can become stronger the next time I see you. You don't have to hide your strength from me, Princess Donghuang said in an arrogant tone. Yi Futian looked at her and smiled, said, I will do as your highness wish. Goodbye. Then he turned around and left the great hall. After Yi Futian was gone, the divine general next to Princess Donghuang asked, It seems that your highness look on him with favor. I heard this man's talent is unmatched in the original realm. Should we consider taking him back to the Divine Prefecture to cultivate? The truly talented people can cultivate anywhere, Princess Donghuang replied. You're right, the divine general nodded in agreement. Princess Donghuang gazed at Yi Futian's retreating figure and cast her mind back to the first time she met him. She figured it was quite difficult for him to achieve his current position. She was only 16 years old when she saw a distressed young man on Mount Tianyao. The crowd stared at Yi Futian when he returned from the Great Hall. No one dared to sneak a peek at what happened inside, nor did they know what Princess Donghuang said to Yi Futian. Everyone was burning with curiosity, especially people from the Shun clan and the Golden Divine Nation. They had a crucial battle only days ago. Needless to say, they were eager to know Princess Donghuang's attitude toward Yi Futian. However, it appeared that nothing big happened inside. Otherwise, Yi Futian wouldn't come out in such a short time. Yi Futian certainly knew what they were thinking about. He shot them a glance and had no intention of disclosing anything. They should play the guessing game with themselves. To be honest, he and Princess Donghuang didn't discuss much. She summoned him only because of his master. Let's go, Yi Futian said to Lord Taishan and the others. Lord Taishan nodded and understood that there was no problem between Yi Futian and Princess Donghuang. He felt much relieved. Soon, they left the empty imperial palace and prepared to return to the heavenly mandate realm. The cultivators from other forces dispersed after Yi Futian was gone. Princess Donghuang came to the empty imperial palace and made some rules. But it didn't mean the 9 realms would remain peaceful in the future. The path ahead would still be bloody, albeit organized. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1811 Undercurrent. Chapter 1811 Undercurrent. Yi Futian and other cultivators in the alliance walked back together. Many people were curious about what Princess Donghuang said to Yi Futian when they were alone. Nevertheless, no one asked such an impertinent question. Hua Jiyu and Yi Futian walked ahead, holding hands. She slightly turned sideways and looked at Yi Futian with her clear, beautiful eyes. Then she asked in a soft voice, What did she want you for? Hua Jiyu had been innocent and ingenuous ever since she came out of the Brahma's pure sky. Little by little, she started to understand certain things now that she had been around Yi Futian for a while. For example, she became aware of the concept of jealousy. Princess Donghuang was so stunning. If Hua Jiyu were a man, she probably would be attracted to a woman as beautiful as Princess Donghuang. On top of that, as the daughter of Donghuang the Great Emperor, Princess Donghuang was the most prestigious woman in the entire Divine Prefecture. Taken by surprise, Yi Futian blinked his eyes. He didn't expect Jiyu to ask him about his conversation with Princess Donghuang. Besides, Yi Futian could sense her honest and genuine emotion when he looked into her bright eyes. You really want to know? Yi Futian asked her with a smile. Yes. Hua Jiyu nodded slightly. Why? Yi Futian asked mischievously. He was poking fun at her on purpose. From what he could see, Jiyu seemed more and more lively and spirited nowadays, even though he knew she might never be the same person anymore. He started to feel like she could completely forget about the past and fall in love with him one more time. Am I not your wife? Hua Jiyu said as a matter of course. Yi Futian was at a loss for words. She was absolutely right. The wind whipped through Hua Jiyu's long, black hair. Yi Futian smoothed out her hair on her forehead and gazed at her familiar face. He said gently, there was a master who treated me very well when I was in the Eastern Barren Territory many years ago. You were in the Eastern Barren Territory too at that time. And you used to visit the cottage. I told you about this. The master of you and second sister? Hua Jiyu asked. Yes. Yi Futian nodded and continued. He was taken away later by Princess Donghuang. She said he committed some crimes. That's why she wanted to talk to me. Hua Jiyu nodded and asked, then how is your master doing now? She said he is not well. But he asked her to check on us and see if we are okay, Yi Futian answered in a low voice. Hua Jiyu was silent for a while. She tried hard to cast her mind back to that time, yet couldn't remember anything. It sounded vaguely familiar to her, but she still felt like her memory was sealed off somewhere. Lord Taishan and other people were surprised by Yi Futian's story. They didn't think Yi Futian and Princess Donghuang had such a relationship in the past. Futian, who is your master? Lord Taishan asked. I just heard from Princess Donghuang that my master was the great emperor's study attendant, said Yi Futian. Oh, I see. Lord Taishan nodded. No wonder Princess Donghuang summoned Yi Futian alone. Regardless, Lord Taishan never contacted Donghuang the great emperor and didn't know much about the people around the great emperor. It appeared that Yi Futian's master was responsible for some crimes. Such a pity. Otherwise, Yi Futian could have had a connection with the great emperor. Being the great emperor's study attendant might sound insignificant. Still, the person would have a close relationship with the great emperor and might be able to bring Yi Futian directly to the Donghuang imperial palace. So Gu Donglu is also his disciple? Jiang Qingzi from the celestial gate of vast heaven asked. Yes, Yi Futian smiled and nodded. Third brother Gu was the one who taught me most of the time. A master didn't like to run the show. He must be a fascinating person, Jiang Qingzi commented in a low voice. Yi Futian and Gu Donglu were both his disciples and built such a deep friendship with each other. He truly deserved to be the great emperor's study attendant. Yes, a fascinating person who doesn't know much about cultivation, Yi Futian laughed. Now that he thought about it, his master only demonstrated his skills once in the end. He didn't even give his disciples many lessons. Without any conflict or dispute, cultivators from different forces each returned home. It was almost as if the grudges and animosity between them evaporated all of a sudden. Nonetheless, everyone in the 9 realms understood that the world's division was already determined, and at least one group would be eliminated sooner or later. For instance, the Heavenly Mandate Academy alliance and the partnership between the Golden Divine Nation and the Shun clan were irreconcilable. After the Battle of the Divine Palace, they would not quit unless the opponent was annihilated. Although Princess Donghuang set up certain rules, they would try their best to find a way to eliminate each other within the rules. Also, the 4 top forces in the Ziwei realm picked different sides. The future clashes were unavoidable. The same thing went for the Central Emperor realm. Unless they could maintain the balance forever, one side would conquer or destroy the other side at some point in the future. The only thing uncertain was the timing. However, both sides had been holding still since Yi Futian, and the others returned to the Heavenly Mandate Academy. They both knew that the problem had extended far beyond the Heavenly Mandate Academy and the Golden Divine Nation. Even if one group in the Ziwei realm went to the empty Imperial Palace and requested to start a war on another group, everyone would be dragged into the mess immediately. Would the Heavenly Mandate Academy sit idly by if the Dou tribe wanted to launch an attack? Subsequently, would the Golden Divine Nation watch the Dou tribe destroying the School of the Emperor Star? After the Divine Palace's battle, The Golden Divine Nation had no choice but to ally their one. Otherwise, they could be overpowered by the Heavenly Mandate Academy and their allies. Therefore, neither side acted recklessly for now. The 9 realms entered another period of peace. In the meantime, the forces from the Divine Prefecture were also weighing their options. Princess Donghuang dictated a set of rules for them. Any of them involved in the war in the original realm would not be allowed to leave the original realm for 10 years. While it wasn't too long of a time, nobody knew what would happen in 10 years. The master cultivators especially needed to think it over. Their group couldn't afford to have multiple of them staying in the original realm at the same time for 10 years. What if something happened in the Divine Prefecture? The peace didn't last long. A deep undercurrent was surging underneath the surface in the 9 realms. On this day, Gai Qiong and Gai Tsong were sitting on the thrones in the Golden Divine Nation. Their faces both turned gloomy after hearing a piece of news. You can't figure it out? With a grim expression, Gai Tsong asked the person who reported the news. Your Majesty, we couldn't find anything, the person replied. How many people so far? Gai Tsong's voice was ice cold. 8. The messenger lowered his head. In recent days, several cultivators from the Golden Divine Nation disappeared and later found dead one after the other. Their investigation yielded 0 results, and they had no clue who was targeting them. Moreover, the victims were all key figures in the Golden Divine Nation. To successfully assassinate them without leaving a trace or drawing any attention, the enemy must be exceptionally powerful and well-prepared. Useless. Gai Tsong scolded him. Keep investigating. Yes, Your Majesty. The man bowed and left. Gai Qiong and Gai Tsong exchanged a look. Gai Tsong asked, They have been quiet these days. Could it be them attacking us in secret? Princess Donghuang set the rules herself. I don't think they dare to defy her. Gai Qiong's eyebrows knitted tightly. He served under Donghuang the Great Emperor and believed in Princess Donghuang's authority. Yi Futian always does as he pleases with no respect for the rules. We don't know what he and Princess Donghuang talked about when she summoned him alone that day. Perhaps Princess Donghuang was really impressed by him and dropped a hint. Thus, he ignored her rules and assassinated our people secretly? Gai Tsong said suspiciously. Gai Qiong frowned. No one knew what Princess Donghuang and Yi Futian discussed that day. Everyone waiting outside was speculating. Did Princess Donghuang look on Yi Futian with favor? Yi Futian might be bold enough to conduct such operations if Princess Donghuang gave him a hint for real. Besides, I asked around. Only people from our Golden Divine Nation were killed. Gai Tsong's voice was low and hoarse. He continues, I think it's necessary to inform the empty Imperial Palace about these assassinations. We can only put more pressure on our enemies this way. Actually, the Golden Divine Nation was not the only group that was targeted. Several forces in the 9 realms had lost a handful of cultivators each in the past few days. Their investigations didn't go anywhere either. However, it didn't cause an uproar since most of the forces only had 1 or 2 people killed. Although those groups didn't publicize the issue, there was plenty of internal speculation and discussion. For example, the same thing happened in the Ziwei realm. Many people were wary of each other. If they made it public and communicated with each other, they might realize that it was somewhat similar to when Hell resurged. Right now, in the domain of Hell, the top force that unified the Hidden Land realm, Lord of the Underworld sat high in the throne of the Underworld. His eyes scanned the people around him. There weren't many of them, but they were all extremely powerful, like a circle of black shadows. What's going on out there now? Lord of the Underworld asked. They are suspecting each other, one person replied. The 9 realms were already in a muddle. These assassinations would make them distrust each other even more. Lord of the Underworld gazed into the distance. The current situation in the 9 realms provided them an excellent chance. They went to the Central Emperor realm last time in the name of meeting Princess Donghuang, while in fact that was only one of their objects. They also wanted to see how powerful the cultivators who gathered in the empty Imperial Palace truly were. They could use that information to plan for their actions. What about the empty Imperial Palace? Lord of the Underworld asked. About the same. Princess Donghuang doesn't seem to be leaving anytime soon, the man replied again. Let's ignore her. She commands 9 realms, yet our dark court only controls 1. That's not enough, Lord of the Underworld said coldly. Gather our people. Let's do it. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 1812 Apocalypse of Shadow. Chapter 1812 Apocalypse of Shadow. The Hidden Land Realm and the Shadow Realm bordered each other. The Hidden Land Realm was also known as the Realm of Darkness, and the Shadow Realm was the Realm of Extreme Darkness. It was the opposite of the Solar Realm. The whole Shadow Realm was filled with dark and cold air. The cultivators of this land were skilled at shadow magic. It was said that in the 9 realms, the Solar Realm and the Shadow Realm had been forged and nurtured from divine items. Yuyue Divine Palace was called the master of the current Shadow Realm, and it was the strongest force there. They had their own force from the upper realms, which was an incredibly powerful force. Now they had come down to the lower realms and were slowly taking over Yuyue Divine Palace. Moreover, they seemed to want to take over the entire Shadow Realm. On this day, Yuyue Divine Palace seemed to hang high in the sky like a moon palace. Clear and cold halls surrounded the Divine Mountain. There were many women there. Due to their feminine physiques, women were skilled at shadow magic. Thus, many of the cultivators of Yuyue Divine Palace were women. This was exactly opposite from the Solar Palace. Most of the cultivators, some men, cultivated sun magic. At that moment, a supremely beautiful woman was sitting upon a practice stage in the palace. Her aura was cold and clear. She sat there cultivating alone, seeming very solitary. A figure approached her from the front. Suddenly, the woman opened her eyes and said, "Master." This woman was the goddess Changxi of Yuyue Divine Palace. Her master looked off into the distance, making Changxi ask, "What is wrong, master?" "My heart is troubled. I feel like something is about to happen," said her master. Right now, the 9 realms are relatively calm. Princess Donghuang has personally commanded the fighting to stop. There won't be any trouble for the time being, said Changxi. Yuyue Divine Palace had been gathering its strength and cultivating in secret. They were not displaying their power. If there were any sudden disasters, they would not happen to them. Changxi's master frowned and said, "Given the current disorder, anything could happen. Moreover, there are more powers in the 9 realms than those under the control of the Divine Prefecture." Changxi knew what her master was talking about. Previously, the cultivators of hell had descended upon the empty imperial palace. The Dark Court had been behind that. Now they had taken over the Hidden Land realm, which meant that they had designs for the 9 realms. A gray figure flashed towards them off in the distance, moving as swiftly as a bolt of lightning. A voice resonated throughout Yuyue Divine Palace. "The Hidden Land realm has attacked the Shadow Realm." The voice rang through the palace. For a time, everyone in the palace trembled fiercely. Many figures shot up into the sky above the palace. In but an instant, many Renowangs appeared and stood up in the sky. The Hidden Land realm had invaded. They all knew very clearly what this meant. The Hidden Land realm was under the control of the Dark Court. If the Dark Army had attacked, this meant that the Dark Court had launched a realm war. They meant to swallow up the Shadow Realm. The Shadow Realm bordered the Hidden Land realm and had similar atmospheres. Thus, the Dark Court had sent their army there first. Did they mean to take the whole realm? A figure appeared up in the sky. Moonlight fell, covering the entire area. "Guanghan, go to the empty imperial palace right now and ask for help," ordered the figure up in the sky. "Yuechan, lead the people below the Renhuang level away from here. And send a few groups to other forces to ask them to join together and help us." "Yes, Palace Lord," came the answer. Suddenly, a group of figures flew through the sky as the palace became a scene of chaos. Everyone at low level was beginning to leave. They knew that given Yuyue Divine Palace's power, they would have no way to resist when the Dark Court invaded. They had to go to the empty Imperial Palace to ask for help. However, they also knew it probably wouldn't come in time. Also, if the Dark Court wanted to occupy the Shadow Realm, they probably would not only attack them. They would attack all the forces in the Shadow Realm and conquer them. Just as the Palace Lord of the Yue Divine Palace gave those orders, darkness began to spread towards them from a distance, like night was falling. It was moving extremely quickly. In a short time, the divine beings within Yue Divine Palace no longer shone with such brilliant moonlight. It was as if they had been infected by a darkness that was suppressing them. A vast army appeared in the dark sky under the moonlight, outside of the palace. The Lord of the Underworld, one of the 7 kings of the Dark Court, was among them. He had brought many cultivators with him. And not only that, but some of the other forces of the Dark World had also rushed to the Shadow Realm. Suddenly, many terrifying black holes appeared in the dark sky, like vortexes of the underworld. Destructive underworld spears appeared and shot downward towards Yue Divine Palace. In a flash, many cracking sounds rang out, followed by cries of pain. Many of the people of Yue Divine Palace had been slain by the spears that now pinned them to the ground. "Go!" yelled someone. Terrible, massive dark beasts were charging towards them. They looked like monsters from hell. They had ferocious fangs with which they bit the cultivators on the ground to death. They rampaged through Yue Divine Palace, killing everywhere they went. Everywhere they passed was left in dead silence. Not even the grass was left alive. They were cruel and violent, and they brought endless death and despair to them. This was the Dark Court. There had been a death knell when the Dark World went to war. They brought darkness everywhere they went and left no light. The cultivators of Yue Divine Palace were furious when they saw all this, but the powerful standing up in the air remained calm. Although there was fury in their hearts, they would not let it influence the situation. This was what the world of cultivators was like. It was just that such fierce fighting had not happened in the 9 realms in too long. But several centuries ago, a slaughter like this would not have been out of the ordinary. People everywhere would have been plunged into an abyss of misery. In the previous internal disputes of the Divine Prefecture, there had been rules. The realms under Princess Donghuang could be constrained, but the Dark World would not be so compliant with their invasion. This was not at all like a battle between 2 armies. It was a slaughter. Words paled before a slaughter like this. They would have no meaning. Thus, no one asked for mercy, and none was given. Everyone attack. But do not be overzealous in your fighting, ordered the Palace Lord of Yue Divine Palace. The opposing army had come to destroy them. In this situation, it would be suicide to fight them with all their might. None of them would survive it. Today, they would all try to escape. Thus, she had ordered them to fight their way out. Protect the goddess. Her eyes fell upon Changxi, and a mighty aura burst forth from her. Suddenly, the vast area around her turned extremely cold and filled with dark, icy power. A full moon appeared behind her. Moonlight fell upon the army of the Dark Court. Suddenly, many of them were covered in frost. They had been frozen by great path ice seals. At the same time, destructive attacks burst forth under the moonlight, smashing into the icy area. Many of the frozen figures were shattered and killed. More and more people were dying every moment. It was a horrifying scene. The Lord of the Underworld cast his gaze over his opponent. An underworld spear appeared in one of the terrible black vortexes. He stepped forward, and endless airflows of destruction and death swept out from the spear, shooting towards the full moon. Everywhere it went, death swept through the crowds of people. Many people were covered by the death will and died instantly. Several great figures stepped out beside him, walking towards the great figures of Yue Divine Palace. Behind Yue Divine Palace, several cultivators were taking Changxi away, but they were being pursued. "Get her. I want her alive," said the Lord of the Underworld, looking at Changxi. She was a remarkable woman, beautiful and talented, and she was the goddess of Yue Divine Palace. He could leave her alive. Changxi went pale. Under the dark sky, all of Yue Divine Palace was covered by death will. It was like the god of death had descended upon them. All the ancient halls and palaces crumbled and were destroyed. They had no way to stop the invasion of the Dark Army. Now, all they could hope to do was survive. While Yue Divine Palace was being attacked, The other forces of the Shadow Realm were under attack as well. At this time, the Snow Divine Kingdom, which stood within the Shadow Realm, was facing destruction. Although they were strong, they had no incredibly powerful figures garrisoned there. Thus, even though there was only one great figure in the army from the Dark World that was attacking them, the Snow Divine Kingdom had absolutely no power to withstand them. They would be destroyed in an instant. A group of figures stood before the palace in the Snow Divine Kingdom, watching the battle happening in the air off in the distance. There were hopeless looks on their faces. Yi Man was there as well, watching the battlefield with her beautiful eyes. Her father, the ruler of the Snow Divine Kingdom, had a dark spear pierced through his heart at that moment. Countless hopeless cries rose from below. Yi Man's face went extremely pale. She had no more strength. Why was this happening? In the past, when the one she loved had been killed, she had not had any power to fight. Now, the Snow Divine Kingdom was being destroyed, and she could once again only watch. Since she had not yet reached the Renhuang level, she could not participate in the battle. She did not even have the right to die here. A group of figures descended before her. The people of the Dark World had sinister eyes, and they looked at them as if they were prey. One of them looked at her and said, "Leave this woman alive." One of the others nodded. Yi Man trembled. It was hopeless. She was powerless. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. The army of Hell had invaded the Shadow Realm, destroyed Yue Divine Palace and the other top forces, and conquered the realm. The army of Hell had invaded the Shadow Realm, destroyed Yue Divine Palace and the other top forces, and conquered the realm. This news spread quickly throughout the 9 realms, shocking all the forces there. Everyone was at risk. The Dark Court had officially embarked upon the path of aggression. This meant that they were truly making a comeback. The chaotic war that had ended more than 300 years ago had started once again. With that background, how could the forces of the 9 realms not worry? Who knew whether or not the Dark Court's next target would be them? Once the Dark Army descended, there was no way that a single force could withstand them. Yue Divine Palace had been mighty, and some of their top cultivators were even from the Divine Prefecture. But they had been destroyed all the same. Their palace lord had fought fiercely and yet had still been slain. Such an extremely powerful figure had not even been able to escape. Yi Futian and his people received this news relatively early because Changxi, the goddess of Yue Divine Palace, fled to the Heavenly Mandate realm with a few others. The reason she had been able to survive was that her master had stood before her and drawn the enemy's attention, giving her a chance to flee. A few other cultivators fled with her at that time. They all went to the Heavenly Mandate realm. Yi Futian and the others were all awaiting news in the Heavenly Mandate Palace. When the news came, Yi Futian told Changxi and the others from Yue Divine Palace. The palace had been destroyed, and the palace lord was dead. When they heard this, the cultivators of Yue Divine Palace were incredibly downcast. They were so silent that it was a little frightening. "I'm sorry for your loss, goddess." Yi Futian saw that Changxi had not said anything and seemed slightly depressed. He said this to comfort her, but it was of no use. No matter who was facing this kind of situation, they would feel heartsick. It was not something that could be comforted by a few simple words. Changxi looked up at Yi Futian, her face downcast. At that moment, she was not as exquisitely beautiful as in the past, but instead had a look that made people pity her. Her beautiful eyes were lifeless. "The 9 realms are shaken. I knew that chaos was coming, but I would never have thought it would be this sudden. Moreover, I never thought it would fall on us first," Changxi whispered. "It's like a nightmare." Even if she were a Renhuang, she still would have had this unreal feeling. Yue Divine Palace had always stood at the pinnacle of the Shadow Realm. Who would have thought that they would suddenly be destroyed in a single night? Few others could understand what she was feeling. And Changxi was the goddess of Yue Divine Palace. No one had suffered more from this than her. "The world changes too quickly. No one knows what is going to happen tomorrow," whispered Yi Futian. He was very emotionally affected by this. Was what happened to the divine palace not the same? Nowadays, he was starting to get used to it. In the past, many top forces had been reduced to no more than history in both the heavenly mandate realm and the higher heavens realm. Now looking back, forces such as the heavenly mandate dynasty and the divine swordly family had all been celebrated and stood at the very peak of their realms. But they had both been reduced to no more than ash. Nothing in this world was permanent. Now he was at the Heavenly Mandate Academy and had a powerful sense of danger. The academy itself was the same. They had experienced many trials. Perhaps one day, it would no longer exist. If that happened, would he feel like it was strange? The army of hell has invaded the shadow realm and will possibly continue to other realms. We should be careful here in the Heavenly Mandate Academy, Changshi reminded Yi Futian, seeming to just think of this. Moreover, the people who fled from the Yue Divine Palace have probably already reached all of the other realms. I understand, said Yi Futian with a nod. It is said that Princess Donghuang is still in the empty Imperial Palace. This news will reach her very soon. The Dark Army has made its move, so Princess Donghuang will not just sit by and watch. I think she will move very soon. Said Changshi, nodding. The 9 realms lack cohesion, and each has its own motives. Only Princess Donghuang can control them. Yi Futian realized this as well. These days, there were dark undercurrents running through the 9 realms, making many of the forces very nervous. He had heard Dou Zhao speak of the Ziwei realm. The atmosphere there was apparently very tense. Now looking back at it, could it be that the Dark Court was behind all of that? After all, the more troubled the forces of the 9 realms became, the more beneficial it would be to the Dark Court. The 9 realms would not be able to coalesce into a strong power. He had not thought that as conflicts continuously erupted while the 9 realms were in such a disordered state, the Dark Army of the Dark Court would invade. Now, given this background and the power of the Dark Army, no realm had the power to resist them. Perhaps only the Central Imperial Realm could hold them back a little bit. After a period of time, a great figure descended from the sky above the Heavenly Mandate Realm. The man was armored and bathed in divine light as if he was a god of war. Everyone in the Heavenly Mandate Realm looked up at him, including Yi Futian. He recognized the person who was coming. It was one of the cultivators he had seen beside Princess Donghuang. "Orders from the princess," said the man in a clear voice. "The Dark Army is invading and now occupies the Shadow Realm and can launch an invasion into other realms at any time. Thus, all the 9 realms must forge a teleportation great matrix with the empty Imperial Palace at the center. All the forces of the 9 realms can use it to teleport to the palace. In this way, all the forces can gather together at short notice and travel to any one of the 9 realms. Do you have any objections?" Lord Taishin answered from within the Heavenly Mandate Realm. "We will obey. But we will send people to help set up the matrix. The Heavenly Mandate Realm will center their matrix on the Heavenly Mandate Academy," said the Divine General up in the air in a clear voice. All of the realms would be connected through the empty Imperial Palace. In this way, the same thing that had happened in the Shadow Realm would not happen to other realms. They would not be directly attacked and destroyed. "Very well," said Lord Taishin. Facing the Dark Court was no longer a single realm's affair. If the Dark Court descended upon the Heavenly Mandate Realm, they would not be able to handle it on their own. Princess Donghuang sent people to the other realms as well. They prepared a series of extremely powerful matrices that all connected to the empty Imperial Palace. At the same time, the Yue Divine Palace in the Shadow Realm was occupied by the Dark Court. However, the Dark Court seemed to be busy with something. They were setting something up in the recently destroyed Yue Divine Palace. Stone pillars that led down to hell were implanted in the ground. Endless death lightning wrapped around the pillars, connecting across the whole city. And not only that, mysterious connections were formed between the stone pillars, forming a terrible force field filled with destructive power. What was even more frightening was that most of the Dark Army that had come from the Hidden Land realm were busy with this. They seemed never to rest. They kept adding more stone pillars, and the force field grew stronger and stronger until they were so strong it was astonishing. "What are they doing?" asked someone bold enough to watch this happening from a distance. What was the Dark Army doing? As the number of stone pillars increased, they gradually formed a terrifying magnetic field. There were constant, terrible rumbling sounds that probably came from shaking deep beneath the earth. Off in another direction, the leader of the Dark Army, the Lord of the Underworld, was watching everything. The proud son of darkness Qi Yi stood behind him. He looked at the Lord of the Underworld and said, "Are there really divine items hidden underground in the Shadow Realm?" "Of course," answered the Lord of the Underworld. "Why else would the 9 supreme realms be at the center of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path?" "This task seems a bit too arduous," said Qi Yi, staring forward. It would probably not be easy to uncover a divine item. They had already commenced arranging things. At that moment, brilliant divine light flashed in the sky, piercing all the darkness. Everyone looked up and saw a divine general bathed in holy radiance. The great divine general who was always with Princess Donghuang had arrived. He was all alone, and yet he had come to Yue Divine Palace, which was occupied by his enemies. He and the Lord of the Underworld stared at each other, forming a terrible force field. Everyone around them looked on in fear. The divine general acted. Suddenly, countless brilliant, golden divine spears fell from the sky, turning into a divine golden rain. The rain covered a vast area. At that moment, the Dark Army was thrown into disarray. Was this man really so confident in his own power? One person had come here alone. He must have been crazy. The Lord of the Underworld naturally saw this as well. He reached out, and suddenly endless black holes of the underworld appeared, spitting out terrifying vortex storms to block his opponent's attack. This was clearly one of Princess Donghuang's bodyguards, and so his power went without saying. Even the Lord of the Underworld did not dare take this lightly. Boom! The golden spears transformed into golden light, swifter and fiercer than lightning. They pierced into the vast hellish vortexes. Cracking sounds rang out as the light broke out through the other side of the vortexes, shattering them to pieces. Moreover, the golden light spread out, covering a vast area. It was like a golden river of stars was falling like rain. People of lower levels could not withstand it. This divine general had no intention of showing any mercy. He had come with the desire to slaughter in his heart. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. In the distance, a group of people came from the void and appeared in front of the divine general, while traces of appalling pressure of the great path bloomed and surrounded the others. In the distance, a group of people came from the void and appeared in front of the divine general, while traces of appalling pressure of the great path bloomed and surrounded the others. Suddenly, this dark space became extremely oppressive. Even the giant stone pillars on the ground lit up with brilliant red light at this moment. The blood-colored light permeated the space, shining in this destructive dark world, a frightful sight to behold. "How have you been?" Clearly, the Lord of the Underworld recognized the divine general who appeared. Divine Prefecture and the Dark Court had warred once upon a time, and as both of them were top figures in their respective camps, naturally, they knew one another. The divine general glanced at the other and asked, "So, the Dark Court would completely violate the promise made in the past?" As we have already said when we were at the empty Imperial Palace, times are different now. The gate of hell has been opened, which means that everything is bound to start over again. The Dark Court has only occupied 2 supreme realms, but you, even with the exception of the Mountain Realm, you still have control over 6 other realms, don't you? The Lord of the Underworld said. Mountain Realm was mostly a principality of Buddhism. Because of the close relationship between Donghuang the Great and the Buddhist sect, they had also participated in the previous war. Therefore, the Mountain Realm in the Void Realm was ruled by Divine Prefecture in name only. It had always been the Buddhist sect that preached in the Mountain Realm. The Divine Prefecture would never interfere with that. Start over again? The Divine General gazed at the opponent, focusing on the stone pillars. The Dark Court never had the intention of controlling the original realm except to continue to plunder its resources. Now, the original realm only has the 9 realms. Do you plan to destroy that too? The people in the original realm didn't really know many things in the past, but as the divine general of the divine prefecture, he would be privy to some of the secrets of the original realm. In time immemorial, the original realm was once the main realm. It had experienced the collapse of the heavenly path, the expansion, and the explosion of the world, and after countless decades, it became the original realm that everyone knew today. But the reality was, every realm within the 3,000 realms of the Great Path had some hidden secrets. For example, the empty realm that Yi Futian fought for many years ago between Emperor Xia's realm and Dali was, in fact, a place of resource for cultivation. Naturally, this was also true of the Shadow Realm, which contained the extremely terrifying divine power of the Shadow Realm. Dong Huang the Great unified the divine prefecture and took control over the original realm, but he did not rob these realms of their cultivation resources. Instead, he wanted to maintain the existing structure of the original realm as much as possible and had forbidden any forces to think otherwise. Unless the resources were found in previously undiscovered areas in the 3,000 realm of the Great Path, everything else was off-limit. Like the Solar Realm and the Shadow Realm, many places could only be places for people to cultivate. But now, the Dark Court was making its comeback and wanted to disrupt everything again. They had their eyes first set on the Shadow Realm, preparing to plunder the main realm of the 3,000 realm of the Great Path. If the Dark Court were to be successful, then the entire Shadow Realm would be finished. All beings in the Shadow Realm would suffer greatly, and in the future, it would no longer be one of the 9 supreme imperial realms. It would be reduced to the likes of some ancient ruined realms, as in the history of the original realm. Before the unification of the divine prefecture, this kind of fighting was commonplace. At that time, not only the 9 supreme regions but many other realms were plundered. Therefore, those who had personally experienced that era had a great appreciation for both Dong Huang the Great and Emperor Yi Qing. They both had always held on to their own ideals and pursued their own goals. If the Dark Court intends to do so, then we have no choice but to go to war again. The divine general spoke coldly, with a terrifying look in his eyes as he surveyed the cultivators around him. Once the war started, it would implicate the long-standing dispute between Divine Prefecture and the Dark Court, and it would be another bloody showdown. Not only that, but if they go to war, would other forces from the upper worlds also participate? We don't ask much. This time, we only want the Hidden Land Realm and the Shadow Realm. The Lord of the Underworld said to the Divine General, "You can tell Princess Dong Huang, if our demand was refused, then, whether we go to war or not is completely up to you." The attribute power of the Shadow Realm was closer to that of the Dark Court, which was infinitely beneficial to their cultivation. Therefore, in the 9 realms, after they had taken down the Hidden Land Realm, their second goal was the Shadow Realm. The Divine General glanced at the opponent coldly, then turned to leave. After all, he was by himself, so that he couldn't contend against the top existences on the opponent's side. "Continue," commanded the Lord of the Underworld. Suddenly, all the cultivators dispersed to continue arranging the stone pillars, as if they were forging a supreme great matrix. Over the years, although they were not in the original realm, the Dark Court had been keeping a lookout for something. Cultivation at this level had the ability to crush sky and earth with a simple wave of the hand. Even an entire world could be shattered. For instance, in many realms of the 3,000 realm of the Great Path, someone like the Lord of the Underworld could smash anything he wished. However, it was a different story in the Great 9 Supreme Imperial Realms. He had tried but was unable to reach the depths of this realm. He could only draw the power from it with the help of a matrix. Otherwise, if it could be accessed directly, the cultivators from the Shadow Realm would have already tapped into it years ago. Of course, even if they couldn't access it as long as they were in the Shadow Realm, their natural ability to comprehend the shadow power was stronger, just like those in the Solar Realm would be more sensitive to comprehend the power of flames. Above the Shadow Realm, there were more stone pillars, radiating into the endless distance, and they were still increasing. It was as if it intended to cover the entire realm. However, this was not realistic. The Shadow Realm spread across a vast area, so it was impossible to be completed covered. But as the great army from the Dark Court working at it tirelessly, an area the size of a city was already covered, and the work hadn't finished. The area covered by the stone pillars exuded a horrific aura. Many cultivators in the Shadow Realm had begun to leave. They dared not stay, fearing facing great disasters in the future. Now, everyone in the entire Shadow Realm was sorely afraid. At the Central Emperor Realm, in the empty Imperial Palace, Princess Donghuang once again summoned the cultivators of the 9 realms, preparing to gather all the power of the 9 realms in anticipation of dealing with the Dark Court. After the Divine General brought back the message, she did not even consider the possibility to compromise and give up the Shadow Realm. Although a war may result in more deaths, the struggle between the two could only end in one way. The Dark Court would not stop at the victory of taking over the Shadow Realm. When their strength increased, they might continue to encroach on other realms, just as they had made their comeback despite their previous defeat and subsequent retreat from the original realm many years back. Such a situation could only be resolved by war. If they could eliminate the opponent, they would wipe them out without reservation. Oftentimes, war was a necessary means in the pursuit of peace. If there were no victory for the Divine Prefecture, the peace that had been enjoyed for more than 300 years would not have been possible. The 3,000 realm of the Great Path would still be in chaos without order. Therefore, Princess Donghuang immediately summoned all the cultivators and prepared to send troops to the Shadow Realm. It was a matter that could not be delayed. With each moment, the great army of darkness that occupied the Shadow Realm would only become stronger and more dangerous. In the Heavenly Mandate Academy, Futian and the others gathered when they received news from the empty Imperial Palace. They had been called to depart immediately to empty Imperial Palace, in preparation for going to the Shadow Realm. Currently, they were discussing which of their cultivators should be dispatched. Princess Donghuang had summoned us to convene, and that the top figures must attend. What has happened in the Shadow Realm? Asked Futian. The Dark Court is preparing to refine the Shadow Realm, replied the Palace Lord of the Divine Palace. Refining the Shadow Realm? Futian was taken by surprise. Do you remember the stone tablet at the ancestral land in the Divine Palace? Asked the Palace Lord. Futian nodded. The tablet was now at the Heavenly Mandate Academy. That was the divine item left over from the time when Heavenly Path collapsed. In fact, the 3,000 realm of the Great Path itself is a leftover from the ancient times when the Heavenly Path collapsed. Some realms had its cultivation resources plundered and consumed, but others didn't. The Shadow Realm was probably one of them, explained the Palace Lord. Futian was astounded. He didn't expect that there were such secrets. Could this be the essence of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path? Judging from that, the entire Shadow Realm is a great treasure trove of divine items? Futian asked. One can say that the closure of the passage to the original realm by Donghuang the Great was to protect the original realm. Its land can no longer withstand plundering, and its resources for cultivation are few. Many years ago, it had been plundered and cleaned out for generations. The Palace Lord continued. Futian had heard about this before. The original realm was once the origin of the world. The reason for its weakened state was precisely because of countless years of plunder. All of its top figures had all gone to the outer realms to seek their fortunes. Once the Dark Court draws on the power of the Shadow Realm, it will make them stronger. That is why Princess Donghuang ordered the leaders from all the principalities to meet there. The Palace Master continued, but I am a little worried. Worried about what? Futian asked. All the principalities from the 9 realms are now plotting against one another. How much effort will they really exert? Don't forget, many of them are mortal enemies of one another, just like the Golden Divine Nation and us. If this battle were to erupt, once a top figure falls, the elimination of the Dark Court might mean that eventually, these forces from the 9 realms would wipe each other out. The Palace Lord continued, therefore, I am worried that many of these principalities will reserve their strength and not give their all in the battle. Furthermore, the battlefield can change rapidly. With everyone looking out for themselves, who knows what will happen during the battle? Even if we participate in it, we can't be too careful, and we have to rely on ourselves. This time, Futian shouldn't go, Lord Taishan said, not wanting Futian to participate. The Dark Court aside, he was worried about possibly being ambushed by those from the 9 realms. Let's go to the empty imperial palace first as ordered, see what the princess has in mind. Donghuang princess should have some specific strategies, said Yi Futian. It was unlikely that anyone could stay outside of this great battle, after all. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1815 The Descent. Chapter 1815 The Descent. At the empty imperial palace, cultivators from all over the 9 realms gathered once again. Donghuang the Great, who had unified the divine prefecture, was the master of the original realm. No matter how the other forces secretly viewed Donghuang the Great, they still had to obey his orders, at least outwardly. Of course, in peaceful times, the great emperor would never order the various forces in divine prefecture to do anything. After the 2 emperors unified the land, everything they had done was always in the hope that the cultivators of the divine prefecture would be stronger. Their attitude toward the original realm was also a protective one, demonstrated by closing off the passageway to the original realm. Now that the Dark Court had invaded the Shadow Realm, this had threatened the safety of the 9 realms. After all, if they could invade the Shadow Realm, they could invade other realms as well. At this time, it was a reasonable request that the Princess Donghuang had summoned all the cultivators of the 9 realms. After all, to the forces of the original realm, they were fighting for themselves too. The forces of the Central Emperor realm were the first to arrive, and after them, the Heavenly Mandate Academy. They had directly gone to the Shao clan through the teleportation Grand Matrix and came together, so they traveled with incredible speed. Inside the empty imperial palace were Yi Futian and the others. Many other top forces were standing not too far away, such as the Shen clan, the Martial God clan, and the Celestial Worthy Temple. However, they just glanced at one another as if they did not know each other. Neither did they try to provoke anyone. Now was not the time to rekindle old grudges. Other forces arrived successively. During the wait, the cultivators of the empty imperial palace were also there, chatting casually with everyone while continuing waiting for the others. At this time, the palace lord of empty imperial palace came to the side of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. He bowed slightly, saying, "Thank you all for your hard work." As we should. Just as Futian said before, no one from any of the forces in the original realm could escape this catastrophe, Lord Taishin said, and the palace lord of the empty imperial palace smiled and nodded. He glanced at Yi Futian and thought that he wasn't too sure what the princess had talked about last time with Yi Futian. But Yi Futian, as the premier genius talent in the original realm, who was summoned by the princess and who had inherited the will of the great emperor in God's relic, anyone would take note of him. His future was limitless, and the princess should remember his existence. "Will our little friend be going along as well?" the palace lord of empty imperial palace asked. "I am afraid that a fierce battle will be inevitable on this trip to the Shadow Realm." The princess only required those at the very top to go. Based on Emperor Ye's realm, you don't really need to go. The palace lord of empty imperial palace said what he said out of kindness. This battle involved divine prefecture and the Dark Court. If the 2 sides were to go to war, one could only imagine just how strong the participants would be. It was not that he doubted Yi Futian's talent and combat effectiveness, but his realm was still slightly lower. No one can guarantee his safety in this kind of major battle. "Let me take a look first. If the princess needs us to join the battle, we will naturally oblige," Yi Futian replied. If all the participants in the battle were the topmost characters, then there would be no point for him to go anyway. But if the army of all realms were to depart for the battle, he would also follow along. Chang Shi was among the crowd from the Heaven Mandate Academy and wanted to join the battle in person. In the destruction of Yueyue Divine Palace, Chang Shi, as its goddess, had lost many of her elders and friends. It was a pity that she had no ability to avenge them on her own. "That'll work. In that case, let's see what the princess has in mind," said the palace lord of the empty imperial palace. Although he was the master of the empty imperial palace, it was Princess Donghuang, who had come to the lower worlds in person, whose order ought to be followed by everyone. Same with any decision made for this battle. The princess would determine what to do, and his role was to execute. With the arrival of many cultivators, Princess Donghuang appeared once again. She was bathed in dazzling divine light as her eyes looked at the people below, asking, "Is everyone here?" "Your Royal Highness, everyone who was here last time has arrived," answered the palace lord of the empty imperial palace. At this time, in the distance, the light of Buddha blazed with a lingering sound of Buddha. There was a peaceful harmony that filled the air. Instantly, many people raised their heads to look into the distance and saw that the great army of Buddhists had materialized. All of them sat on golden praying mats, like Buddhas that had descended from the heavens. People of the mountain realm had arrived. When Princess Donghuang summoned all the cultivators, she did not include the Buddhist monks from the mountain realm. Princess Donghuang acknowledged that the mountain realm had absolute autonomy and was not subject to the rule of the divine prefecture. This was a consensus reached centuries ago. Every cultivator in the divine prefecture knew that Donghuang the Great held Buddhism in the highest regard. Even after becoming the great emperor, he would still go to the West occasionally to seek advice on Buddhist doctrines. In the divine prefecture, there were reports on and off of when Donghuang the Great had gone to the West and listened to Buddhist preaching, as well as listened to the Buddha Lord reciting and discussing the sutras. Whenever these reports were heard, they were talked about in favorable lights. That even as the great emperor ruled the divine prefecture, he did not forget favors bestowed in the old days, which impressed everyone. Therefore, the emergence of Buddhist monks from the mountain realm at this time was unexpected, but also completely as it should be. Yi Futian had seen the cultivator in the lead. He was the abbot of Tianxian Temple, and behind him was Master Pudu. In addition, there were several young monks next to them. Guizong, who had been to the god's relic with Yi Futian, was among them. There was also a Buddhist monk in a white robe, pure and spotless. His eyes were particularly beautiful, and he seemed to be out of this world. Many couldn't help but exclaimed how handsome of a monk that was before them. Such a handsome monk was a rarity. The monk was smiling with his left palm at his chest. Those unusually beautiful eyes looked ahead. They seemed to fall on Princess Donghuang. Princess Donghuang cast a glance his way as well. Among the group of monks, this one was the most unusual. He easily stood out in the crowd. Abbot of Tianxian Temple from the mountain realm, here to greet Her Royal Highness. The old monk put his hands together and bowed to Princess Donghuang in the usual Buddhist salute. The abbot need not be so formal. Princess Donghuang nodded slightly and said, "Is the abbot here as our reinforcement?" The abbot nodded and said, "Back then, my senior brother, the Vajra Buddha, had suppressed the king of hell and expelled the force of darkness. Now that the force of darkness threatens to make its comeback once again, us Buddhist monks ought to take a stand against it. The abbot is most thoughtful." Princess Donghuang nodded slightly. "I was about to discuss this matter with everyone, just as you arrived." This time the invasion by the Dark Court caused great atrocities in the Shadow Realm, along with the obliteration of several major forces inside the realm. As far as I know, the Dark Court is currently extracting the power from the core of the Shadow Realm, intending on refining its power for their use. If the Dark Court succeeds in doing so, I'm afraid they will only intensify their aggression in the future and continue to invade other realms, and they will be much harder to control by then. Therefore, I asked the empty Imperial Palace to gather all of you here in preparation to go to the Shadow Realm together and confront the army of darkness." Princess Donghuang said, "If this matter is not settled, peace will be impossible for the original realm. Of course, if you don't want to go, I could cease this operation, but you must accept whatever happens in the future. Your Royal Highness, in the land of the 9 realms, when the Dark Court invaded and slaughtered the Shadow Realm, all cultivators share the same destiny, for no one can be spared." Gai Qiong said, "We will wait on the princess order. We also support the princess taking action. We will follow the princess order." All the principalities responded. Now that Princess Donghuang had spoken, if there were really some who said they wouldn't go, it would sound idiotic. They had to be involved in this battle no matter what, or else there would not be much of an original realm for them in the future. They were not so foolish to think that the young princess was someone who was easily deceived. As the most beloved princess by Donghuang the Great, she herself was also a Renhuang, and so she was not someone who they dared to trifle with. Very well. If so, let's set off together. Princess Donghuang said, let's expel the force of darkness once again from the original realm. Aye. Everyone nodded at the same time, spoke in booming unison. Depart, Princess Donghuang commanded. As soon as her voice fell, she was the first one to step out. She did not ask which realm would go and which wouldn't, however, since the princess was leading them herself, Yi Futian understood and also followed behind. In the empty imperial palace, the mighty army moved together, which was extremely spectacular. At this time, the Shadow Realm became gloomier, especially the vast area that radiated from where Yuyue Divine Palace used to be. Looking down from the firmament, it resembled an apocalyptic world, with an expanse spanning thousands of miles. The area was enveloped by a curious atmosphere, while numerous stone pillars were erected on this land as currents of destruction raged. The cultivators from the Dark Court were busy working and had no time to pay attention to the happening in other realms. Their focus was on building this grand supermatrix that required the coordination of many cultivators. Though it looked simple enough, the overall structure was much too complicated, and the task was overwhelming. They had to seize whatever time they had left so that when it was time for war, they would have more of a chance. At this time, a dazzling light suddenly lit up above this destructive space, piercing through the darkness, so that the light appeared once again, and even the blazing glory of Buddhism could be seen. At this moment, the cultivators from all sides in the Dark Court looked up. High above the sky, Princess Donghuang seemed to lead a heavenly army coming at them. The cultivators of the lower worlds were greatly impacted by what they were seeing. They got here fast. Sitting on the throne, Lord of the Underworld looked up into the sky above. He didn't think that they would be here so quickly. Now it seemed that the princess, whom Donghuang the Great doted upon, was decisive and moved like lightning, more effective than he had imagined. Furthermore, the Buddhists had also joined in the war. These bald donkeys had always favored Donghuang the Great and went along with him, no questions asked. These hypocrites probably regarded the achievements of Donghuang the Great as their own pride and joy. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. The Lord of the Underworld rose from his throne. A terrifying aura emanated from his body and spread outward. In the dark world below, cultivators stood at various locations. The stone pillars in an area of tens of thousands of miles lit up with a dark red glow. The Lord of the Underworld rose from his throne. A terrifying aura emanated from his body and spread outward. In the dark world below, cultivators stood at various locations. The stone pillars in an area of tens of thousands of miles lit up with a dark red glow. From the ground, layers of cold and sinister dark, destructive air flows rose and flooded the space. Princess Donghuang stood high in the sky and said, "Top figures, attack." Yes. Silhouettes stepped forward, and frightening auras of the Great Path pressed down on the space. The scorching light from the halo of Buddha radiated outwards. In the sky above, the sound of Buddhist chants sounded, forming a powerful resonance. This made it as though various Buddhas were descending from the sky above the Shadow Realm. Tens of thousands of Buddhas chanted their mantras in unison. Peerless halos of Buddha rained down from the heavens, attempting to suppress the dark air flows. However, the dark air flows immediately corroded the light of Buddha and tainted the divine golden halos of Buddha. They continued advancing and were everywhere. The abbot of Tianxian Temple and the other cultivators sensed a peculiar aura. It was as though their way was being suppressed. It was not just them, all the other cultivators also sensed it. Down below, it was as though the dark air flows surged throughout the entire Shadow Realm. They reached upwards to envelop the sky itself. The Lord of the Underworld closed his eyes. It was as though he wanted to merge into this darkness. In the end, darkness enveloped the entire world. Everyone seemed to be buried within another dark space. Endless dark air flows gathered and formed a tall, majestic figure. It was the figure of the Lord of the Underworld. However, he was 10,000 jongs tall. It was as though the real Lord of the Underworld had appeared. A body of Wei. The various cultivators looked at the figure that had appeared. At this moment, the Lord of the Underworld seemed to be extremely powerful. The huge body of Wei of the Lord of the Underworld stared at the figures in the space. He raised his arm and reached out to grab them. The frightening power of the underworld emanated from his arm. Dark red and black lights were mixed together. It was as though destructive dark flames of the Wei were attacking the crowd. If this palm strike were to hit them, the cultivators would most likely be immediately destroyed, turning into nothingness. The various cultivators of Tianxian Temple recited the name of Buddha. The various figures of the Buddhas gradually took solid form. Divine light of Buddha rained down. Down below, a huge ancient Buddha appeared. Golden light filled the sky. This huge ancient Buddha raised his palm and slammed it downwards. Endless symbols of Wan and light of Buddha burst forth, and its pressure swept down onto the world below. Rumble. Beneath the huge dark handprint, the symbols of Wan that shone with the light of Buddha were decimated. However, the huge handprint of Buddha crashed down towards the dark palm. An intense rumbling could be heard all around. The huge handprint of Buddha seemed to be forged from pure gold and appeared indestructible. It also emanated a divine aura that could eradicate all powers of evil. It was the demon-conquering giant palm of Vajra. Many cultivators were astonished when they saw this handprint. Back then, the ability of the Vajra Buddha was powerful. Many cultivators from the dark forces had perished to the demon-conquering giant palm of Vajra. Now, the Buddhas of Tianxian Temple had sent out this huge handprint at the same time. Its might was astonishing. In the heavens above, two huge endless handprints stirred up a terrifying storm and then collided with each other. The world trembled violently. The two huge handprints shattered at the same time. Destructive air flows and golden light of Buddha rampaged all around them. However, the gigantic body of Wei continued upwards. Destructive divine fire of the underworld suddenly appeared everywhere in the dark world. The crowd looked around them, and it was as though they were actually in the real underworld. Top figures stepped forward one by one. Green divine light descended from the heavens. Everywhere it passed, everything was destroyed. Everywhere divine sword Qinghe passed by, its green light turned everything into nothingness. Everything turned to dust and smoke. It was a divine sword of destruction that could pierce the heavens and the earth. In an instant, the green light slaughtered its way to the gigantic body of Wei of the Lord of the Underworld. The light immediately pierced through it. At that moment, the huge body of Wei was penetrated by endless green divine light. Green light covered the 10,000 zhang tall body of Wei. The huge figure dissipated into nothingness bit by bit. Many people stared in that direction. Was it destroyed? Naturally it wasn't. In the dark world, illusory faces appeared. They were all the faces of the Lord of the Underworld. It was as though he was everywhere in this spatial world. The various cultivators were not surprised at this. Those who had come were all not weak. They were at least at the Renhuang Plain. They were also almost all above the middle-level Renhuang Plain. There were even quite a number of top figures. They were well experienced in cultivation. The ability of the Lord of the Underworld had already broken the shackles of the Renhuang Plain. He had reached the level of a fake emperor. This independent world was formed from his Wei. He was everywhere and could easily coalesce a body of Wei. He was the king of this world. Of course, he was still just a fake emperor. The level of a fake emperor could only be reached when one had no hopes of becoming an emperor. If he was a true great emperor, he could destroy everyone within this world with just a thought. They would not have any hopes of surviving. The two existences were not on the same level at all. However, true great emperors were considered deities. Among the countless worlds of the vast universe, few people could reach this plane. After the collapse of the heavenly path, also known as the Age of Godfall, wanting to become a deity was as difficult as wanting to scale the heavens. Currently, across the extremes of the cosmos, There were only a mere 7 great emperors that the world knew of. These 7 figures were existences that stood at the top of the universe. Among them were Donghuang the Great, the master of the Dark Court, and the Buddha Lord of Western Heaven. They were beings who had already transcended the world. They seldom made a move first. If they were to attack, the consequences would be unimaginable. The world order would be rewritten. Hence, it was difficult for people nowadays to imagine how the previous age was. Before the collapse of the heavenly path, when the deities had yet to fall, the ancient age was prosperous. Unfortunately, they could no longer see it now. It only existed in the realm of legends. However, the various large forces at the peak of the realms still had a few fake emperors. Even in the original realm, there were a number of them. At that moment, the illusory faces of the Lord of the Underworld were staring at the crowd. In the dark world, destructive will spread out. Endless divine fire of the underworld appeared in this independent space. It burned and caused this dark space to become a realm of death. With the divine fire of the underworld burning, no one here could escape. Flames completely surrounded them. This independent space was burning and was buried within the divine fire of the underworld. The top figures frowned when they saw this scene. They then released a frightening will from their bodies. Princess Donghuang still stood in the heavens above. Yi Futian and the Renhuangs of the other forces stood behind her and did not take part in the battle. They could not participate in a battle of the highest level. With the divine fire of the underworld burning, them joining in would only be suicide. The divine general beside Princess Donghuang released a brilliant golden divine light, forming a light shroud. It formed another independent space that protected Princess Donghuang and the rest of the cultivators in it. Rumble. An extremely violent dark storm charged towards Princess Donghuang. The destructive dark storm churned and roared. It destroyed all within its path. Emperor Nan took a step forward, and divine sword Qinghe released green light that shot out tens of thousands of zhang. He formed a seal with his hands, and light immediately exploded out of divine sword Qinghe. Endless green light destroyed everything and shot straight towards the dark storm. Divine sword Qinghe pierced directly into the storm. A huge illusory face appeared in the dark storm. A spear of the underworld stabbed out and collided with divine sword Qinghe. Destructive power swept out to the surroundings. The momentum of divine sword Qinghe dwindled. Terrifying winds consumed it, seemingly wanting to swallow it up. Emperor Nan waved his palm, and divine sword Qinghe returned to his side. The terrifying storm flooded towards Emperor Nan. He was unmoved. The green light around him formed a world of the sword. The terrifying storm directly swept past him as it continued to advance. The hearts of the surrounding cultivators were all trembling. This aura was really menacing. The roaring dark storm charged straight towards Princess Donghuang. The divine general stood in front of her. The golden light shroud enveloped this part of the world. With his figure as the center, a dazzling three-dimensional pattern appeared. This golden pattern contained many runes within it. Instantly, endless divine light shot out. From within the pattern, a terrifying aura surged out. Golden spears shot out from within it like bolts of destructive golden lightning. They pierced the heavens and the earth and bolted across the sky towards the dark air flow that was roaring and churning its way over. Bam, bam, bam. The long spears pierced out and actually seemed to burst into golden divine flames. It caused the masses of dark air flow to shatter into dust. When the countless spears descended at the same time, the might of the roaring dark storm kept dwindling. The divine general extended his hand. Within the three-dimensional pattern, unparalleled dazzling divine light coalesced into a divine spear that stabbed out towards the roaring storm. In that instant, frightening fissures seemed to appear in the space. Golden cracks propagated outwards. It tore apart the space and also shredded the frightening dark storm to pieces. A majestic scene appeared in the heavens above. The long spear formed golden cracks that shattered and penetrated the space. It continued to shoot out into the surrounding space. It pierced straight through the dark world towards the outside. Rumble. The dark world was crumbling. An illusory figure coalesced. It was none other than the Lord of the Underworld. He stood in the air while staring at the divine general who stood guard in front of Princess Donghuang. The Lord of the Underworld revealed a glint of approval. "You are undoubtedly the heir of Donghuang the Great," the Lord of the Underworld exclaimed while staring straight ahead. The brilliant three-dimensional pattern was a divine wheel of the Great Path. Halos of light radiated from the divine wheel. The area covered by the light expanded as the might of the light intensified. The golden divine light was flawless. Each and every halo of the divine light was permeated with unparalleled power. The divine general who served under Donghuang the Great was crowned the #1 spear in the divine prefecture. He was Spear Emperor Duyu. He was also a disciple of Donghuang the Great. His divine will had 9 tiers, and each and every tier was flawless. He was qualified to seek the way of the emperor. He was the inheritor of Donghuang the Great's teachings. If Princess Donghuang did not exist, he had a high possibility of becoming the heir of Donghuang the Great. However, due to the existence of Princess Donghuang, Spear Emperor Duyu could only be her right-hand man. Even though he was an assistant, it did not affect Duyu's position in the divine prefecture. In the divine prefecture, this Spear Emperor was highly regarded. Countless talented maidens from various top forces were willing to marry him. However, the Spear Emperor had no intention of getting married. He was focused on studying the way of the spear. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Beneath where the Lord of the Underworld stood, across the vast expanse of land, crimson dark light flowed up the stone pillars. The light grew brighter and brighter. An intense rumbling sound could be heard coming from the ground. Following the stone pillars, the crimson dark light flowed towards the heavens. Beneath where the Lord of the Underworld stood, across the vast expanse of land, crimson dark light flowed up the stone pillars. The light grew brighter and brighter. An intense rumbling sound could be heard coming from the ground. Following the stone pillars, the crimson dark light flowed towards the heavens. In an instant, it flooded the sky. Silhouettes rose into the sky. They were all top figures of the dark world. They seemed to be consuming the power that flowed out from the stone pillars. The masses of crimson light enveloped the top figures within them. Right now, tens of thousands of miles of land was flooded and buried beneath frightening dark red light. Even in the heavens above, the army of the divine prefecture felt the extremely sinister aura. This frightening power seemed to want to smelt them within it. Divine fire of the underworld enveloped this part of the world. In the heavens above, countless dark lotuses appeared like flames of hell. These countless dark lotuses flew out. Their petals of death opened and closed as they surrounded the cultivators in the heavens above. Hell flowers, blossom. The Lord of the Underworld uttered these words. One by one, the hell flowers of the underworld blossomed and enveloped the crowd. Be careful, Duyu reminded everyone when he felt the alarming will. The top figures of the divine prefecture headed down and charged towards the various cultivators in the matrix. Relying on the power of the matrix, the destructive power of the divine fire within the hellflowers grew even more powerful. It seemed as though one would perish with just a single touch. Powerful will burst forth from their bodies and became the defensive power that enveloped them. The various cultivators of the mountain realm advanced. The light of Buddha shone brightly, and the various Buddhas appeared. The scorching light of Buddha cleansed the world. However, when the hellflowers reached it, the light of Buddha was similarly consumed. It was corroded by the hellflowers. The petals of the hellflowers blossomed, and they became huge beyond comparison. The flowers kept advancing towards the cultivators of the mountain realm. The destructive divine flames of hell were like fires of the end times, extinguishing the light of Buddha. The power of Buddha originally could subdue the power of evil. However, right now, it was instead being suppressed by the other party. This proved how terrifying the other party's way was now. Relying on the divine item in the core of the shadow realm and using a matrix to harness its power, the hellflowers evolved and became even more powerful. The entire sky was covered in hellflowers. The Buddhas all had serious expressions. The abbot of Tianxian Temple put his hands together. Endless light of Buddha burst forth from his body. Behind him, the other members of Tianxian Temple also did the same. They chanted the sound of Buddha. The sound of Buddha immediately circled the place and generated resonance. Around them, huge golden ancient Buddhas appeared. These ancient Buddhas enveloped all the members within them, becoming indestructible golden bodies. When the hellflowers reached them, they flowed over the golden bodies of the ancient Buddhas, attempting to consume them. However, by merely touching the golden bodies, the power of the hellflowers was weakened, and they could not corrode the golden bodies. The other cultivators also displayed various miraculous powers. Emperor Nan's body flashed with green divine light. His sword hummed in front of him. Under the destructive green divine light, the hellflowers could not approach him. However, he was frowning slightly. He never imagined that these people could utilize the divine power of the Shadow Realm so quickly. Of course, he knew of the divine item in the core of the Shadow Realm. However, after so many years, even Yuyue Divine Palace could merely utilize a fraction of its power in their cultivation. Now, with the arrival of the dark forces, they immediately could refine and use this power. This was very dangerous. They had clearly made preparations all these years. Invading the Shadow Realm was not a spur-of-the-moment plan. The cultivators of the Divine Prefecture that were charging towards the opponent were caught within the Hellflowers. Many of them could not attack the other party. In the heavens above, when Duyu saw this scene, he wielded his golden divine spear and took a step forward. "Protect the princess," Duyu said to the group of people next to him. Aside from him, the empty Imperial Palace Lord was also standing guard beside Princess Donghuang. She was Donghuang the Great's only daughter. Her safety was of the utmost importance. Even though the Dark Court did not dare to attack her, they could not lower their guard. "All right," empty Imperial Palace Lord replied as he nodded his head. Duyu stepped forward. The brilliant three-dimensional pattern on his body grew brighter and brighter. In an instant, it blocked out the sky and the sun. Across the vast sky, with his body as the center, a huge pattern appeared. It seemed to be a matrix. From within it, the unparalleled power of the Great Path surged forth. He pointed the spear in his hand forwards. Immediately, from within the pattern, countless golden spears swept across the sky and massacred their way down. Spears rained down from the heavens above. Each divine spear contained invincible destructive power that showered down on the cultivators below. The top figures of the Dark Court raised their heads and looked into the sky. The disciple of Donghuang the Great, Spear Emperor Duyu, had a flawless 9th-tier divine wheel. How powerful was he? In the previous clash, even the Lord of the Underworld, who had become a fake emperor, found it hard to best Duyu. "Be careful. All of you, retreat," some top figures of the Dark Court shouted loudly to their juniors. A divine spear carved with the brilliant light of runes descended from the sky. With a loud rumble, it immediately pierced through a stone spear and turned it to dust. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Stone pillars kept shattering and turning to dust. Not only that, but countless divine spears also stabbed into the matrix on the ground, destroying the foundations of the matrix. The divine spears that were stabbed into the ground actually generated some sort of resonance and lit up with brilliant light. The ground split apart, and cracks appeared. The matrix was destroyed. Duyu himself took a step forward. The next moment, his silhouette immediately disappeared from his spot. The crowd only saw a dazzling golden divine light penetrate the space and shoot down to the sky below. Blooming hellflowers were disintegrated and returned to nothingness. The divine spear descended. Under the golden divine spear, divine light ripped the space apart. Scary-looking cracks appeared. The tip of the spear was laced with unparalleled destructive power. But a dark air flow surged out. The Lord of the Underworld did not receive the spear. He actually avoided it. The dark air flow receded. The divine spear stabbed into midair. Bang! There was a huge explosion. The instant the divine spear touched the ground, destructive spatial cracks propagated outwards. The Lord of the Underworld raised his palm and sent it crashing out, blocking the terrifying power that tore the space apart. The land frenziedly split apart. The cracks propagated far and wide. It seemed as though the world was falling apart. Duyu's actions had not stopped. His arm swept out, and the divine spear instantly cleaved down. Its speed was extremely fast. The afterimage of the spear immediately consumed the space. It was as though it was opening its big, bloody mouth to swallow the figure of the Lord of the Underworld. Terrifying spatial fissures appeared, seemingly sealing off the escape route of his opponent. The attack of the Spear Emperor was invincible. His long spear was like a dragon, slaughtering its way forward. It destroyed all within its path with astonishing momentum. No matter how powerful the existence was, they absolutely did not want to face Duyu's divine spear. The gaze of the Lord of the Underworld was frightening as he stared at Duyu's movements. With a single thought, the dark world of the Underworld appeared. The figure of the Lord of the Underworld directly became an independent space. His figure became a body of Wei. He became a menacing illusion of the god of the Underworld. A terrifying head tried to swallow Duyu directly. Duyu swept his long spear out horizontally. Golden divine light swept out, and the head exploded. However, many faces appeared in the space. They were all the faces of the Lord of the Underworld. Duyu, even though you have a flawless divine wheel, I have transcended the Renhuang plane for many years. You are no match for me. Voices filled the heavens and the earth. They seemed to be everywhere. He was the master of this spatial world. He had a body of Wei and was omnipresent in this space. Duyu frowned. If it was purely a contest of attack power, he believed that the Lord of the Underworld absolutely could not withstand his divine spear. However, the Lord of the Underworld had dwelled at the fake Emperor plane for many years. He had a body of Wei, and it was indeed hard to handle. Wanting to kill him would be extremely difficult. Slowly, Duyu's body floated in the sky. Even more brilliant divine light burst forth from the patterns on his body. The divine spear in his hand floated in the sky. Duyu formed a seal with both his hands. His divine wheel pattern immediately exploded with endless light. "Go!" he cried out. In an instant, innumerable golden divine spears shot forth and tore apart huge cracks. They attacked in all directions. Even if the Lord of the Underworld had a body of Wei, Duyu would still shatter it. Outside, frightening battles had also erupted in other battlefields. It seemed as though the endless space was falling apart. The cracks in the ground grew more and more shocking. The divine light that exploded out of the stone pillars became more and more powerful. The land seemed to be unable to withstand the tremors from these clashes. The power of these clashes was also growing more powerful. Huge rumbles could be heard. Within tens of thousands of miles, all cultivators could sense this frightening earthquake. The cultivators of the Dark Court stood frowning on the ground. What was going on? In the heavens above, Princess Donghuang gazed down at the ground below. She also sensed the intense vibrations which seemed to originate from deep underground. At that moment, the crimson divine light from the stone pillars intensified. It was a shocking sight. Extreme power of the shadow realm flowed out and spread throughout the sky. The divine item had been disturbed? Princess Donghuang frowned. If that were the case, earthquakes would erupt over the entire shadow realm. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.